If you're a fan of Ansel Adams, which I am, you have these wonderful contrasts, just white, mountains contrasted with these blues. The icebergs and ice flows would have all these variations of blue in them, and the water really blue, especially near the ice, and then sort of fading into black. You had brown rocks and just a very few colors, but a lot of them all mashed together, and just the contrast was unbelievable. I never imagined it'd be as pretty as it was. You could actually get up on the bow of the ship or go in the pilot house, and you could actually watch them navigate through these ice shelves. And it'd be a little bit like, some of these ice shelves are, the equivalent of a 40-story tall building. If you could imagine a smaller city, like in my case, spent a lot of time in Austin, Texas, where the buildings, they've sort of kept them not too tall. But if you can imagine sort of navigating in a ship through a medium-sized city, and these buildings are all tabular icebergs, that's kind of what it was like. You were looking up, towards the sky to see the top of the ice shelves. One of them is called the Larsen Ice Shelf, and it's one of the biggest ice shelves in the world. And it started cracking and disintegrating, and so we drove through, or navigated through, the remnants of the Larsen Ice Shelf, and what used to be probably the size of California in terms of sheer land mass is now, probably one 1/100th of that size. And so to see that up close and personal, it's pretty remarkable, that maybe there's something to this. We land there, my first landing, there's literally penguins just walking around, and we were told that there's going to be trails that the penguins have created for themselves. Just over the years, they charted their own trails, and they were here before we were. They had the right of way, and so if you're walking on a penguin trail and one approaches you, you have to step aside and let them pass. And so, sure enough, here I am walking along a trail, penguins coming right towards me, and it was like a little bit of a standoff, and so I just stepped aside, and he just sort of walked on by, and I kept along my merry way. But one night we decided to camp out on the ice, and so we're all in our sleeping bags, and the next day, I guess this was an area where fur seals like to come and sun or whatever, and they probably just saw these huge amorphous-looking figures and thought that we were fur seals as well. So they came up pretty close to us that next morning and sort of tried to get in our sleeping bags. So 2041 is a unique year. The Antarctic continent is not owned by anybody. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's got spheres of influence, and folks make territorial claims to Antarctica. Argentina, New Zealand, Germany, Chile, a whole host of countries have claims staked there, but there's no true ownership of Antarctica. And that ownership, or those claims, have been laid out through a treaty of Antarctica that's due to lapse in 2041. So that's why the organization is called 2041. So in that year, I know it's a long way off, but in that year that treaty lapses, which opens the doors for Antarctica to become open for commercial development. I think we all share responsibility. It's interesting to use that term, corporate responsibility, because I think of it as there's got to be a solution. It's got to involve political leaders, corporate leaders, and community leaders to make a difference. And it certainly changes my view of sustainability. Then in trying to think about what I can do to advance the cause. And one of the things that I've been probably most proud of is just getting out in the community, talking with kids about Antarctica. to tell them something like, hey, in 1950, the average household had an oven, maybe a TV if they were lucky, lights. That may be it. That may have been all the appliances and electrical needs that they had in 1950. And the average square foot of a house in 1950 was around 900 square feet. Today, the average square foot is 2,500 square feet. And if you think about all the things that are needed in terms of electrical appliances, of course I call it needed, but people expect to have these things. Computers, more than one, refrigerators, ovens, all that same stuff, iPods, cell phone chargers, central air and heat, and it keeps growing. And so people, I think, more and more expect to have these things, and all of that makes it, creates a footprint. But if 90% of the Earth's ice is in Antarctica, that means about 70% of the Earth's fresh water, drinking water, comes from Antarctica through the water cycle. So that's significant. So if we have significant melting going on there, we're talking about some serious degradations to our Earth's fresh water supply. It's a little bit hard to think about some of these things like climate change from Charlotte, North Carolina, but to see the extremes of the Earth and how they're being impacted, I think really made me realize that maybe they're onto something here.